2 times 3 times 2 times 3 times 1. Well, we can't do all of them at one time. Let's do 2 times 3 and write what? 6. Then 6 times the 2 then is what? 12. 12 times 3. And that's 36 times 1. So we get 36. In other words, if I don't have any negatives at all, I get 36. How many negatives do I have? 0 negatives. Okay? All right, now let's say I don't have 2, let's say I have 1 negative in here, okay? Instead of 2, it's a minus 2. I have 1 negative. Well, you're going to get a different answer, aren't you? Okay? 0 negatives gave you 36. 1 negative will be a minus 36. That's if you have 1 negative, okay? What if you have 2 negatives, okay? 2 negatives is different than 1 negative, so this has to switch back again and give you a plus 36. That's if you have 2 negatives, okay? Notice the similarity between 2 negatives and 0 negatives. We're still getting a plus in both cases. All right, what about 3 negatives? 1, 2, 3 negatives. Well, the 36 becomes a minus 36. Well, with 3 negatives, I'm getting the same as 1 negative, aren't I? Okay? So it looks like it's boiling down to 0 negatives or 1 negative because you're getting the same answers, okay? 2 negatives, it's really like 0 negatives because you're getting a 36 in both cases here. And 3 is like 1, isn't it? Okay, same answer. So if you have 4, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, then this negative 36 has to switch back and be a plus 36, okay? That's with 4 negatives. So 4 negatives is really like 2 negatives, which is really like 0 negatives. You see, it all boils down to having 1 negative or 0 negatives, okay? All right, because you're getting the same answer. The answer for 0 is the same as 2, is the same as 4, is the same as 6, is the same as 8. You're always getting 36 with an even number of negatives here, okay? So if you had 5, since 5 is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 is different than 4, so it must be negative. That's if you had 5 negatives, okay? You see a pattern here? You see a pattern? 0 is the same as 2 is the same as 4, isn't it? Okay, so if you have 0 or 2 or 4 or even 6 negatives, okay, it's going to yield a positive, isn't it? Okay, so really 2 and 4 and 6 is really like 0, okay? And if you have 0 negatives, hello, if you don't have any negatives at all, I'll say it again, if you don't have any negatives, then the answer has to be what? Okay, so 0 negatives is plus, and same thing as 2 and 4 and 6 and 8 and 10. They're all just like 0 negatives, and if you don't have any negatives, it has to be positive. Now, what if you have an odd number of negatives, like 1 negative, or 3 negatives, or 5 negatives, or 7 negatives? Really, they were all what? The same as 1, wasn't it? Now, if you have 1 negative, if you have one of the numbers that's negative, guess what it's going to be? It's going to be negative, isn't it? So 1 negative is negative, and so is 3 and 5 and 7. So go back here a minute ago. All of these are like you don't have any negatives at all. It's either 0 or 1, people. It's either 0 or 1. And all of these are like 0 because these are all even. Okay, and if you don't have any negatives, let me ask you again, if you don't have any negatives, what is it going to be? Well, I don't have any negatives, so guess what it is? But if I have 1 negative, 3 is just like 1, 5 is just like 1, 7 is just like 1 because they're all odd. And if I have 1 negative, guess what it's going to be? 1 negative is going to be negative. Okay? So it all boils down to 0 negatives or 1 negative.